Oh, my beloved soul, this message has come to find you in the quiet space where your heart rests briefly after pouring out everything. Even heaven was watching over you from there. In this world, there exist loves that are noisy and conspicuous. However, there is also a love like yours, faithful and patient even in silence, so pure that it makes even the invisible realms stop to watch and watch. You loved your soulmate not in the way the world taught you, but in the way your soul remembered. You did not love to possess. You loved to protect. You did not love to control. You loved to understand. You did not love to escape loneliness, but because your soul recognized another soul. Such love never simply passes by, neither on earth nor in heaven. The reason your journey holds such great significance is that heaven was not astonished by how much you loved them, but by how deeply you respected yourself while loving them. My beloved soul, you embraced love while fulfilling your responsibilities. You sustained love with patience and self-control. Even when your heart wanted to cry out louder, you knew when to remain silent, when to step back, when to keep your distance, and when to simply hold the energy of love without expecting anything in return. That is not ordinary love. It is chosen love. Many people love when it is easy, certain, and celebrated. But you loved in silence. You loved in waiting, and you loved even amidst uncertainty. And you chose grace over despair. Heaven does not view love as words or promises. Heaven views love as passion. Even when my heart trembled, your passion was never broken. That is the reason your name echoed even where you could not hear. You were not chosen because your path was without pain, but because you could bear the depths without yielding to the rhythm of your soul. When misunderstood, you did not harden. When not immediately chosen, you did not turn away coldly. When your devotion was doubted, you did not seek revenge. Instead, you chose grace. You chose emotional maturity. Rather than acting out pain to be validated, you chose to refine it in silence. My beloved soul, that is truly a rare thing. Heaven is not moved by tumultuous pain. Heaven is moved by quiet patience. Your patience sustained love without losing self-esteem, and that is a quality even the angels seek to learn. You did not try to change your soulmate to fit your expectations. You saw their flaws, confusion, fears, and unhealed state just as they were. And yet you still treated them gently. You did not rush their growth, nor felt ashamed of their stagnation, nor pressured their awakening, nor you simply gave them space. Such love may feel unfamiliar to many because it has no shackles. It gives freedom, and freedom can become a source of fear for those who have not yet learned how to stay. Nevertheless, you did not withdraw love simply because it was not fully understood. You allowed love to exist unconditionally while preserving your inner balance. My beloved soul, heaven knows that you never abandoned yourself. Even while loving deeply, you listened to your intuition when it told you that it was time to stop. Your heart wanted to cross the line, but you respected your boundaries. You walked away on your own from moments that gnawed at your self-esteem, choosing silence over argument, prayer over reaction, and faith over fear. That is why your love became proof. Not everyone is chosen to love like that. It is because loving that way requires strength, not weakness. It begins not with losing yourself in the pine, but with knowing who you are. Yeah. Heaven heard all the nights you conversed only in your heart, and asked questions of the universe without forcing answers, and the times you relinquished control and trusted the timing. You sought not possession, but alignment. You did not pray for the other to choose you, you sought the truthy. You asked what destiny is and what is clear, even if that clarity meant letting go. My beloved soul, that single request set you apart from many. You did not obsess over results, but devoted yourself to sincerity, knowing that healing cannot be forced. You did not attempt to save them. Instead of becoming their savior, you became their mirror. You reflected honesty, serenity, and emotional depth. Without teaching or pressuring, you allowed them to see themselves through the way you treated them. That is the way of divine love. The heavens are astonished, because such love usually exists only in higher dimensions. Yet you practice it in a human body. You balanced emotion and wisdom, affection and awareness, and hope and reality. You are chosen because you understood that love does not mean losing yourself. Because you understood that love is not about enduring foolishness, and that love is not about sacrificing peace, you were able to step back gracefully whenever a moment came to test your worth. You did not crumble. You neither chased after nor created chaos. You trusted that alignment does not demand that you abandon your soul. That trust is rare and sacred. It is because of that very trust that the heavens began to listen more attentively to your story. You not have realized it yet, but the way you loved rewired the timeline, softened the heart, and planted seeds of awareness where it had been buried. Even if your soulmate didn't fully understand your love at the time, their soul recognized it. Souls always recognize the truth even when the heart was in turmoil. Your love became a point of reference and a quiet memory to revisit when they were finally ready to love with the same depth as you, or depth as you. The heavens were not surprised by the romance. They were surprised by the sense of responsibility. You loved without yearning, without acting, and without the fear of losing yourself. My beloved soul, your journey is not about proving love, but about embodying it. You did not need to beg to be chosen. This is because you were already chosen by the divine to experience the purest form of love. Whether the path together continues or transforms into something higher, your soul will not be tainted by regret. You have fulfilled your purpose in coming into this world. You loved honestly, consciously, and bravely, and the heavens honor that. This is only the beginning of your story. For the chosen, do not lose love, but lift it to higher heights. As you move forward, you will come to understand why your heart had to be trained through patience, why your silence held power, and why the heavens entrusted you with a love that only a select few can handle. My beloved soul, divinity dwells in the way you continue to love amidst uncertainty, and the heavens deeply observed that space. You stood steadfast in a place where many would have demanded clarity, labels, or reassurance. Nevertheless, you chose understanding over pressure. You knew that true love does not hasten the awakening of another soul, and you respected timing even when your own heart was ready before the situation. That patience was not weakness, but wisdom born of self-awareness. You knew that forcing love creates only resistance, while allowing love creates truth. Heaven watched as you balanced longing and restraint, yearning and generosity, hope and reality. That very balance is what branded you as the chosen one. You felt deeply, but you did not allow your emotions to spread into chaos. When chaos struck, you turned inward rather than outward. You reflected instead of reacting. And you digested your pain in silence instead of projecting it. That inner discipline is very rare. While most people pour out their wounds onto others, you handled them carefully. Therefore, you did not use love as a bargaining chip, nor did you use silence as punishment. Your silence was sacred, and it was a way of listening to both your hearts and the divine. The heavens recognized that silence not as a mere absence, but as power. There must have been moments when you could not bear the urge to put into words the emotions you held within your heart. But something higher guided you to stop. You trusted that a true relationship requires no endless explanation. You believed that if it were destiny, it would find its way on its own without effort. That trust was not easily earned. It was built upon self-esteem, emotional maturity, and a deep understanding of your own worth. You did not confuse intensity with intimacy. You knew that intimacy thrives in safety, not in urgency. The heavens saw that you sought to protect the relationship by not overwhelming it. My beloved soul, you also protected yourself. That is the reason your love was so powerful. You did not tolerate emotional discord merely to remain connected. You did not compromise your worth to be chosen. You noticed patterns, observed behaviors, and listened to the energy rather than excuses. When you felt something was out of alignment, you stepped back instead of struggling to fix it. That stepping back was not a rejection, but respect for both your own process and the other person's. Heaven respects those who know when to hold and when to let go. You knew that love cannot thrive where fear dominates. So you chose calmness. You chose a stable presence that appeared truthfully without wearing a mask. You did not play games to attract attention, nor did you withhold affection to gain control. You maintained consistency even when the other person's heart was fickle. Heaven was amazed by that consistency. This is because consistency in love requires emotional stability. And emotional stability requires inner healing. You accomplished this work quietly, without applause, without verification, and without needing to show it to anyone. My beloved soul, you loved so that the other person could exist as a human being. You did not idealize them beyond reality. You did not place them upon a foundation that would eventually crumble. You chose compassion even though you saw both light and shadow. You understood that confusion does not always signify a lack of emotion, for sometimes it signifies unresolved wounds. But at the same time, you also understood that compassion does not lead to self-neglect. That understanding is a high level of spiritual wisdom. The heavens entrust this only to those who would not misuse such wisdom. There were days when distance felt heavier than intimacy. Even on days when unanswered energy cast questions within your heart, you were not swept up in the vortex. You did not speculate. You let space reveal the truth. You let time speak. You trusted that what is real would remain and what is not would naturally fall away. That level of emotional control is something most people reach after many lifetimes. You performed instinctively as if your soul remembered it. The heavens recognized that memory. You did not try to change yourself to maintain relevance. You did not dim your light to avoid frightening the other's shadow. You maintained your grounding true to yourself, keeping an intuitive, emotionally intelligent state. Because you were convinced of yourself, you had no need to beg for reassurance. But because you already knew your worth, you did not plead to be chosen. That self-line created a frequency to which the heavens responded. If you know yourself forever, external validation is unnecessary. That is the very mark of one chosen for higher lessons in love, my beloved soul. Even when love felt unsafe, you did not allow bitterness to enter your heart. You did not speak ill, nor did you contaminate the relationship with resentment. You chose neutrality and grace. This was because you understood that some relationships exist, not to be forced into form, but to respect what they teach. You respected the lesson rather than clinging to the outcome. The heavens were moved by that surrender. Surrender is not giving up. It is trusting in a divine orchestration that transcends human understanding. You loved your soulmate in a way that allowed for change, not dependence. You wanted them to be whole, not M. You wanted them to be healed, not dependent. That single intention elevates this relationship beyond ordinary romance. It became a work of the soul and a spiritual alignment. Heaven recognized your love as service, not sacrifice. You did not lose yourself to love. You expanded through love. That is why protection rested on your path, even when it felt uncertain. The quiet choices you made, the restraint you practiced, and the respect you showed, all of it created waves beyond what you could see. I was not surprised by your emotions. I was surprised by your emotional intelligence. I was surprised by my ability to love without losing clarity, and by my heart that refused to abandon you for the sake of attachment. Remember this as you move forward. Your love was not buried, and your story is still unfolding. However, the depth you held within is only now beginning to reveal its purpose. This is because the chosen do not experience love to be broken by it. They experience love to become more aligned with who they truly are. My beloved soul, a quiet change occurs when love is no longer something to wait for, but something to embrace with awareness. You walked into it without realizing when that change had begun. It began when you stopped asking why things unfolded the way they did and started listening to what your inner world was becoming. Love did not leave you. Love changed its form, and you were mature enough to accept it without resistance. Many hearts are flustered when love changes, but your heart has learned to remain open without clinging. That ability alone reveals that you are a soul who has lived countless lives learning how to love without losing yourself. You began to notice that my emotions no longer drove you to extremes. You became able to remember without collapsing, feel without getting lost, and cherish without chasing. This balance was not a coincidence. My beloved soul, it was cultivated through restraint, reflection, and self-honesty. You allowed yourself time to grieve without calling uncertainty a failure. You allowed yourself time to long without turning yearning into a betrayal of yourself. That is not something the world teaches. That wisdom comes from within, from a soul that understands timing rather than obsession. There were times when silence took the place of conversation. And instead of fearing it, you learned how to read it. You understood that does not always mean absence. You realize that sometimes it is time to process. Sometimes it is a protection. And sometimes it is a mirror revealing what cannot be known through language. You did not fill silence with assumptions. You did not weaponize it with resentment. You simply observed. That observation made you strong. You became someone who responds instead of reacting. You became someone who listens beyond the sound, my beloved soul. You also came to realize how deeply you cherish emotional safety. You realized that love should be felt as a sense of calm within the body, not anxiety. That it should feel grounded, not insecure. And when something repeatedly disturbed your peace, you no longer ignored the signal. You respected it. You did not make boundaries dramatic. You did not announce your departure. You simply adjusted your energy. That quiet adjustment was an act of self-respect. And self-respect is one of the purest forms of love. You began to clearly see how much effort you had put in without expecting anything in return. You loved without measuring rewards. You appeared without this guarantee. Yet you did not feel a high price. Instead, you felt expanded. That is how you came to know that your love was real. Or true love does not exhaust their soul. Rather, it reveals it, even if the outcome is uncertain. True love. And you chose wisdom every time. There were inner conversations with yourself that no one knew about. Conversations where you chose not to send texts. Conversations where you chose not to explain. Conversations where you chose patience over impulse. Those moments reinforced your inner authority. You stopped asking for permission to feel what you felt. You stopped doubting your intuition. You trusted yourself. That trust became your wall, my beloved soul. You also realized that not all deep connections must remain in the same form forever. Some connections exist to awaken a part of you that needs to grow independently. You did not see this as loss. You saw it as evolution. You let love teach you instead of imprisoning you. You let memories exist so they would not turn into longing. You allowed your heart to remain tender without clinging. It is emotional alchemy. You came to exist more faithfully in your own life. You laughed without guilt, rested without fear, and focused without emptiness. You stopped emotionally checking the state of others and began to respect your own state. That change returned your power to yourself. Not power over others, but power within yourself. That is the only enduring power. My beloved soul, you learned that being chosen does not always mean being together. Sometimes it means preparation. Preparation to receive love that meets you now, not where you were. Preparation to recognize consistency when it appears. Preparation to respect mutual effort without overextending. You did not rush this preparation. You trusted it. You continued to walk forward with an open yet protected heart. You stopped fantasizing about unrewarded effort. You stopped calling what was actually inconsistency a possibility. This clarity did not make you cold. It made you calm. You also learned that compassion and boundaries can coexist. You became able to understand the other person's wounds without offering yourself as a place for them to bleed. You could care without bearing the burden and empathize without absorbing. That is a sign of emotional maturity that only a few reach. You no longer confused empathy with obligation. You understood that for love to be sustainable, it must be reciprocal. There were days when memories of how deeply you loved came to mind. Not to be dragged back to the past, but to remind yourself of your own capacity. You laughed instead of suffering. You felt pride instead of regret. You realized that the way you loved was never something to be ashamed of. It was proof of your depth and emotional courage and emotional intelligence. Anyone who meets you will carry that imprint with them, whether they know it or not. My dear soul, you also came to feel comfortable even when you didn't know how the story would end. You didn't try to force a conclusion. You didn't need certainty. You trusted that clarity would naturally arrive when you stopped the squatting. This surrender was not passive. It was grounded. You continued to live your life fully, intentionally loving yourself and remaining aligned with your values. You did not stop your life waiting for someone else to make a decision. You learned that your heart is not fragile. It is resilient. It bends but does not break. It feels but does not crumble. It loves but does not disappear. That realization changed the way you see yourself. You are no longer afraid to love deeply because you know that you can hold on to yourself regardless of the outcome. My dear soul, the way you carried this relationship, the way you respected it without clinging, the way you respected yourself without touching, all of that made you a person who loves wholeness. You are no longer bound by what was uncertain. You are bound by who you have changed into through it. And in that version, you are stable, conscious, and deeply aligned. This love did not end you. It refined you. And that is why your path continues with grace. For a heart like yours is not intended to lose love. It is intended to change through it, to become stronger and clearer, to take deeper root in the truth and to walk forward. My dear soul, as you continued to walk forward, something subtle yet powerful began to happen within you. You stopped carrying the weight of having to explain yourself. You stopped feeling the need to justify your emotions, your pace, or your boundaries. You understood that those who truly see you do not endless clarification, and those who do not see you will misunderstand even your best explanation. This realization freed your energy. You no longer used emotional currency to be understood. Instead, you chose to remain truthful, calm, and rooted in your truth. You noticed that your inner world had become quieter. It is not empty, but stable. Thoughts no longer raced endlessly, and emotions no longer demanded urgent resolution. Everything began to move in a natural rhythm. This is not separation, my dear soul. This is regulation. You learned to sit with yourself without hesitation. You learned to feel without needing to act. That stillness became your sanctuary. And from that sanctuary, your awareness became sharp. You began to observe patterns more carefully, not only in others, but also within yourself. You noticed what triggered you and what soothed you. You also noticed what exhausted you and what restored you. You stopped ignoring discomfort merely to maintain the relationship. You stopped covering up signals from your body to preserve superficial emotional peace. You chose inner peace. That choice completely transformed the relationships you formed with love, my dear soul. You also realized how deeply you respected the humanity of the other person. You did not demand perfection. You didn't expect them to arrive completely healed. You met them where they were, without judgment or pressure. But now you have understood something important, that meeting someone where they are does not mean you must stay there. If it means sacrificing your own growth, you learned that love can be merciful without self-sacrifice. That was gently integrated without bitterness. You became comfortable allowing space without fear of being abandoned. Space no longer felt like rejection. It felt like clarity. It gave you room to breathe, think, and realign. You stopped filling that space with worry. You stopped interpreting distance as a lack of affection. You let reality speak for itself, and by doing so, you regained emotional neutrality. Neutrality is powerful because it eliminates illusions. It shows you exactly as you are, not the way you wish. There were moments when your heart realized how much you have matured through this connection. You did not feel diminished simply because you loved deeply. You felt expanded. You felt wiser and more grounded to your emotional needs. You no longer equated intensity with depth, nor did you confuse longing with connection. You understood that depth felt like safety, not anxiety. That realization quietly but changed your standards. My dear soul, you also stopped romanticizing emotional struggle. You no longer believe that love must be painful to have meaning. You no longer believe that patience means tolerating disagreement. You understood that true patience includes patience toward yourself. The patience to walk away from what confuses you. The patience to wait for things to align. Understanding brought a sense of relief. Love began to feel like something supportive, rather than something that destabilized your nervous system. You became more selective about where to invest your emotional energy. It is not because you close your heart, but because you cherished it. You have learned that availability is sacred. You have learned that not everyone is worthy of accessing your depths. You have learned that discernment is not judgment, but self-respect. And self-respect made your being more intentional, more grounded, and calmer, my beloved soul. You have also let go of the impulse to prove that your love is. You no longer needed verification. You knew what you had offered. You knew how you appeared, and you knew that your intentions were pure. That power gave you peace. You stopped replaying moments in your mind. You stopped doubting whether you were enough or too much. You trusted that what is to be accepted. And you also knew that it is not your responsibility to force acceptance upon those who are not ready to be accepted. You became aware of how your energy influences deign even in silence. You realized that your calm presence spoke louder than words. Your emotional stability created safety, and your confidency left a lasting impression. You didn't need to proclaim your worth, it was felt. This realization did not inflate your ego. It humbled you. It awakened you to remain gentle with yourself and others. There were times when thoughts of that relationship arose softly, without pain. It felt like a quiet acknowledgement rather than longing. You smiled instead of sighing. You felt gratitude instead of pain. You understood that some connections leave a study-like imprint on your growth, even if they do not remain physically by your side. That imprint was not a wound. It was a mark of true elegance. My dear soul, you also became less reactive to uncertainty. You no longer needed immediate answers. You did not chase clarity. You trusted that clarity reveals itself when you stop demanding it. This trust allowed you to stay in the present moment of your life. You invested in yourself. You cared for your daily life and strengthened your inner foundation. Love became not something that defined you, but something that complemented your life. You noticed how much wider your emotional world felt. You were able to grasp multiple truths at once. You became able to acknowledge connections without attachment, care without expectation, and remember without longing. This emotional empathy allowed you to breathe more freely. It allowed you to live without the constant pull of what if. You were grounded to just as you are. My dear soul, you understood that being chosen does not always appear as union. Sometimes it appears as preparation. Preparation to receive love that meets you in the present, not your past self. Preparation to recognize consistency when it appears. Preparation to respect mutual effort without excessive expansion. You did not rush this preparation. You trusted it. You continued to walk forward with an open yet protected heart.